Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming tonight. We're really excited to have you all here out in Parramatta. I'm Tom Mooney. I'm the Executive Director of Democracy at McKinnon, and really pleased to be partnering with the Burning Platforms podcast in support of tonight's event. Democracy Counts is a campaign to renew the rules around politics and media in Australia. Our research shows what is probably not surprising to many of you in the room, that Australians are frustrated by the political system. They don't trust politicians, they don't trust media, they don't trust social media, and there's a strong urge for renewal and change of our system. The good news is that our system's pretty robust and there's confidence in the core elements of our system: support for an independent electoral commission, support for compulsory voting, support for compulsory preferential voting. But clearly the rules around media and politics haven't kept up with people's expectations. Our campaign is about building the political pressure and space for governments and parliamentarians to act, and harnessing the kind of untapped energy and ambition amongst Australians to see the rules change. Australians are looking at the international examples where democracies are under threat and backsliding, and they're clear they don't want to see that happen here at home. Our research shows high levels of dissatisfaction and distrust, and we know that with emerging technologies, the threats that we're facing are only going to accelerate. We recently published an open letter to all parliamentarians, published in the AFR and the Australian, and we called for mandated civics, education, digital media literacy, investment in public interest journalism, social media regulation, electoral funding reform, lobbying reform, and to protect the independence of the public service. The campaign's building an alliance of organisations who do work in democracy day in, day out. Proud to be supporting 47 organisations who do that work, and that continues to grow on a daily basis. We're supporting these organisations and joining up their work because we know there's power in many voices, one message. And we're calling on the public to count themselves in to support our campaign. And tonight's an opportunity to hear from some of our campaign partners and supporters and test ourselves on what's true and what's not. Peter, Lizzie and the panellists are going to touch more on the campaign throughout the event, but if you're interested in the campaign, don't forget to count yourselves in. Visit democracycounts.org.au. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Welcome to the Five, everyone, and for those joining us online, welcome to the internet. My name's Peter Lewis and this is Burning Platforms. For first-time listeners, Burning Platforms is an independent podcast produced under the auspices of Per Capita. Joining me is my fellow pyromaniac, the co-founder and chair of Digital Rights Watch, Lizzie O'Shea.
Great. I'm feeling on fire. It's so good to be in Parramatta.
We burn things. When we started talking about technology during the pandemic, we were a bit off Broadway, right? So how do you think the public dialogue about technology has changed over the last few years?
Yes, coming into centre stage, it feels like what was fringe is now mainstream. I think it's quite clear that a lot of people want to have a lot more conversations about how technology is shaping our lives, that online life is not separable from everyday life in the real world. But these conversations are also becoming more sophisticated. I think people have learnt some of the lessons from the last 20 years in how they've seen social media unfold, and they're more sceptical of the promise, particularly from AI companies, and they're interested in having governments that do the work on their behalf to advocate for their interests and make sure benefits from new technologies are retained where they're generated in places like here. And
I really feel the last 12 months, a lot of this has gone from being hypothetical to being real lived experience. So people are experiencing the way technology is affecting the way they see the world.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed the other day, particularly on AI regulation, which is, an umbrella term for lots of different fields of regulatory endeavour, regulators, policy making. One of the key concerns coming out of a survey done by our friends at the Tech Policy Design Institute found that privacy is actually one of the main concerns people have with AI technology. And I think that's because they understand how this technology is being integrated into lots of aspects of life. They're being asked more and more to share personal information, and they maybe want some way to stop doing that. Now, When I campaigned on privacy even a few years ago, people were like, this is dead. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. And I would then ask them for their credit card number. But what I would say is that that's now returning as quite a central conversation. Access to personal information, the terms on which you're required to bargain with some of these very powerful companies is starting to be brought back into the discussion. And privacy reform is a human right that I'm really excited about. And one of my missions is to make it exciting to people as well, is now coming back to the fore, which I'm really pleased about.
Yeah. So as Tom mentioned, tonight's event is part of McKinnon's Democracy Counts campaign, campaigning to build momentum for meaningful changes to our democracy. And central to that is the health of our information ecosystem. So we decided to build tonight's event off the terrific AB series, A Matter of Facts, which I hope you've all watched, but if you haven't, we'll be showing snippets from it tonight. And to help us make sense of it, I'd like to welcome the host of that series, the ABC's Hamish Macdonald, to the stage. Hi, Hamish. No, get the one closest to Lizzie. So it's great to meet you. I actually always assumed you were AI yourself, and it was really good for your mum to clear that up in the series.
Well, Hugh Marks, the managing director of the ABC, mentioned the other day that Anthropic wants the entire ABC archive, so I may well be.
You might be the Max Headroom of your generation.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced, though, you haven't been cloned, right? ABC Mornings, Global Roaming, Special Products. So I'm glad one of you has made it to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So congratulations on the series. It captured a lot of the threads Lizzie and I have been talking about over the last few years, and I thought you pulled it together really well. I guess for a reporter like you, like most stories end up as fish and chips. So how important has it been for you that program was a catalyst for an ongoing conversation?
It's sort of like it's interesting timing, and it's actually interesting hearing Lizzie make the point that the discussions you've been having in recent years have kind of gradually found their way to centre stage, because actually making the series The Matter of Facts, and thank you to those of you that have seen it, and I would encourage those of you that haven't to go and find it on iView. It's still there. But it actually felt like it drew together a lot of different threads that I've been kind of tugging at throughout my career. So, you know, if I go back to 2008, one of the first conflicts I covered was the Russian invasion of Georgia. Right, it was a very short conflict. It happened around the same time as the Beijing Olympics, and I got sent there to anchor the coverage for Al Jazeera, who I was working for at that time. And, you know, that was the first time I'd been in a conflict where, or in a reporting environment, where there was such clear and deliberate mis and disinformation. So literally the government of a country, Russia, saying that what you're seeing in front of your eyes is not happening. You know, that was quite shocking. It felt very kind of out there that anyone would even try and do that at the time. And yet throughout my reporting career, whether it's been in the Middle East or going back to cover Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in 2015, you just sort of saw this grow. Yeah. This tendency to just deny the reality of what you were seeing in front of your very eyes. And I think as a foreign correspondent, which is how I spent, you know, the bulk of my early career, that was the beauty of your reporting. You were outside of a domestic political dynamic by and large, and the reporting was very simply who, what, where, when, why, and how. You could observe what you were seeing on the ground and describe it. Yeah. And you were there, and I loved that about television, because you could literally be physically standing in that space and describing it and speaking to it. And it was quite difficult to challenge that. But I think over the course of my career, that I think we all know that's changed radically.
And it was interesting. So it was kind of an exotic creature of brutal regimes for a while, the idea of disinformation, but it feels like it's almost business as usual around the world now. So that's been one of the shifts we've picked up, that it's not just, Lizzie, Russia and China, it's American corporations operating in Australia that are part of the same set of perverse incentives, really.
Yeah, or business models, as I like to describe them, prioritising certain kind of content that is more extremist, that's more polarising, that then gets amplified by the algorithm. So there's decisions made by people to generate this content, state-based actors, state-based actors, but then also they're working to a platform that they're optimising, which may have been designed, with a particular intent in mind, but is serving a different, potentially, purpose. And the companies appear somewhat indifferent to that. So there's a real challenge, I think, in working out how you hold both of those players to account.
So tonight we're going to be asking you to help us drive the conversation using one of my favourite bits of technology, Menti. So if your phone's off, turn it on, keep it on silent. The QR code should be up there. We're going to try it out in a sec. While people are getting into the machine, Hamish, what was your main takeout from the series if you look back on it now?
How honest do you want me to be?
Well, no, I want you to come and give us fake views.
Well, look, you're always looking for the possibilities and the solutions, and I would say I came away from it a little bit scared because the solutions are not obvious. And, I know we're going to talk about Audrey Tang and the Taiwan example, but, going to different parts of the world and looking at possible solutions didn't exactly fill me with hope and optimism. And I often think how things look from afar versus close up is quite different. Like, we sometimes talk about Taiwan as a really radical example of very interesting ideas, and they had this first digital minister, and hasn't it been a success? But then when you're on the ground there, it's a little more sceptical, even of Audrey's ideas. People say, well, it was very noble and very optimistic, but I'm not sure if this is going to work.
We might hold that till we get Jess Scully on the stage. But yes, fair point. If people are in, have we got enough thumbs up there? Are we over 30? Yep. Why don't we give it a test drive? Who do you trust? Who do you trust when it comes to getting facts about the world? And the media, social media, government, friends and family. Jump in there. What do you reckon what's the most trusted source for you these days, Lizzie?
Well, I think some of those conceal a few different actors in there that I might be more inclined or less inclined to trust, including within my own friends and family. But I think some of the research suggests that where people are obtaining their news from, for example, isn't always the place they trust the most. So there's a bit of a disconnect in how people behave that we need to kind of question and work out what we can work with. But I'm sort of not surprised to see friends and family at the top there. I think that's one of the ways in which social media gains its power. You see people posting about things, you know them, you have some way to verify them in the real world, and then you can make judgments about the content they post. So I'm not surprised that friends and family rates higher, even if we're not talking about Uncle Jeff.
Yeah, Hamish,
no offence, Jeff.
Poll this.
I have an Uncle Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Everyone's got an Uncle Jeff. We regularly poll this, and friends and family is now the most trusted source of news, which is this cognitive dissonance that where are they getting their views? And so this is the idea of filter bubbles, that everyone's getting the information they want.
It'd be very interesting to see the overlap of friends and family with social media, because presumably
they feed into it.
Yeah, they'd be feeding.
Yeah. Thank you for that, everyone. So why don't we jump into one of the snippets for the show that digs deeper into the question of trust. Hamish, starts off with a bit of Tristan Harris from who you interviewed from the States, but we'll show that and then get back into the discussion.
There used to be something called consensus reality, that mostly we are seeing a shared set of stories, a shared set of events. But if you look at a big moment in culture, you'll see how different tribes or political groups who live in different information bubbles, when they see this story, they see specific evidence that is different than the evidence that other tribes see.
Dr. Timothy Graham from Queensland University of Technology analysed more than 300 accounts using the arson emergency hashtag, and a third of them could be from bots.
Not only individuals, but also media, as well as potentially malicious actors, are picking up on this content and spreading it. It spreads like wildfire.
So whatever is maximally inflammatory is what the algorithms are sorting for and then making that the center of attention for every topic that is inflammatory. And we can't even see it because it has literally been our 24/7 reality for the last 12, 15 years.
Yeah, it's almost stating the initial problem there, but I think setting that as the centre, that we've got a system that's broken. And I thought that came out really strongly in the show.
Yeah, I just watching it now, I was thinking back to, I'm sure everyone will remember this, it was early 2017 when Trump first became president the first time round. And do you remember the interview that Kellyanne Conway, his then press secretary, gave, where suddenly she said, well, no, I'm using alternative facts. And at the time, that was so shocking, I think, for so many people in the Democratic West. The notion that someone would just outright say, no, I'm not using the same facts as you, I'm using my own. And I think, we're only, what are we, 10 years down the track. I feel like that's the day-to-day reality of our politics now. Politicians routinely say, oh, no, I'm not using those facts. These are my facts. Yeah. And so that's very difficult to contend with in a public discourse.
You go.
Well, I would also argue, some of the ways in which these networks are deployed to disseminate content are very hard to examine, especially when you're an individual user. So, many of the platforms that are social media platforms that we come to know have a lot of accounts in there that may not be associated with a real person, but it's very difficult to ascertain that. There are lots of ways in which monetization of certain kinds of content influences what gets posted on there. So, for example, in one of the there was an instance of a stabbing in Sydney where content was monetised that was both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic, right? At the same time, making out like the accused was from one of those two groups. And that is a function of a pull factors on how this business model is created. They are light touch in terms of who can make an account. They're light touch in terms of who can purchase space for advertising. And they are prepared to monetise all sorts of content that is fitting with their algorithm. And those things together create a very nasty environment in moments when we need facts the most. And I think we have to contend with that.
So let's test our ability to tell fact from fiction. We're going to play a game. We're going to show you 3 bits of media content and ask people, is it real or is it fake? We've played this a few times, Lizzie. First when we compared Dan to a chatbot, and then the second time with AI slot music. And it was really hard, yeah. So this time we're going to test your wits with a few news clips, and hopefully this technology works. So the way it works is in your phone, you're going to be given a few seconds to look at the particular artefact. The first one is here. When we hit go, the first ones to make the right choice get the extra points, and whoever gets the most points gets to drink with Lizzie afterwards.
You can talk about the Pope choice.
Firstly, our favourite Pope. Real or fake in the puffin?
That's your favourite Pope?
Oh, that's the old one.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not Leo looking like Leo. Oh, my goodness. What do we reckon?
He doesn't know his Pope's well enough. This is fake news, Peter. Your favourite...
Papa Francesco?
Yeah.
The rundown. I got my Popes mixed up because this new Pope's almost turning me. He's great. Everyone's voted. Excellent. What do we reckon? Who thought real?
Ooh.
Fake.
54 to 10.
So in March 2023, a single Mid-Journey image posted as a joke by a US construction worker believed as genuine news within hours by millions. Pablo Xavier was a 31-year-old Chicago construction worker who told BuzzFeed he came up with the idea while tripping on mushrooms. I'm trying to figure out ways to make something funny because that's what I usually do. I just thought it was funny to see the Pope in a funny jacket. Hamish, is this just garden variety slop or should we care?
Well, I'd acknowledge it's funny.
Yes.
It probably is just slop. I don't know whether there's more to who sort of pushed it out more widely, whether there's motivation there that I'm unaware of. But what I would observe is that I think there is so much of this sort of stuff that it's, and I noticed, talkback radio is really interesting, right? Because you get a real-time reaction from your audience. I think there is a broader conditioning that is going on in society to disbelieve what's in front of their eyes. So I think the dividend is there for the liar, the dividend is there for the fake. Not everything has to be a lie or to be fake for the broader community to then doubt most of what they see. And I think for me, in terms of like public discourse and democratic function, that's where the risk lies in this kind of thing. We know, because some of it's obvious, that a lot of stuff is fake, but it then leads us to question pretty much everything. And I think we have a tendency, every day we'll hear, read or see news that we don't like or makes us feel uncomfortable. And we've got another option in our brain now in regards to how to reject that. So rather than thinking, why do I disagree with this argument? Why do I not like this policy? What's the case I would make? How would I go about creating change? There's another little thought bubble that I think is arising for a lot of people, which is must be fake, must be misinformation, must be disinformation. And you see that happen every time you have a politician.
And it allows you to ignore things as well. It gives you a permission not to engage.
There's a kind of new language, a new license there to dismiss what people say. A politician might come on the radio and people will just start shouting back at you via the text line or the phone line. This is misinformation. This is disinformation. Why do you put these people on? And that for me is where the danger, the risk lies.
Let's have a look at number 2. This is a video clip, Jeff. One of my favourite YouTubers.
What's happening in the Caribbean right now is the most shocking geopolitical collapse I've witnessed in my 30-year career as an economist. America deployed its largest military force to Latin America since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The result? Maduro was sworn in for a third term and Washington lost control. Let me tell you something. This story isn't just about Venezuela. This is the operational manual for the decline of an empire. And right now, this manual is being written, published, and distributed to the world in real time.
Okay, is that true or false? Minty screen coming back. Let us know. I think you get, ready to get your points. We won't do the reveal until people...
So what's the question? Is that a fake video?
Is that real or fake? What do you reckon? What are you hitting? You're a discerning journalist, Hamish Macdonald.
Yeah, well,
surely you can tell.
Well, I'm mindful that the more confident you are, the statistically more at risk you are of getting it wrong. But I would have just watched that and thought that's real.
And it's really hard because he's actually talking in the same field that you'd expect. Like Yanis, who, for those who don't know, Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek finance minister, a very progressive voice on the global stage.
But maybe he's looking a little fresh of face there.
Yeah, it's fake. It's fake. Yanis discovered his AI face and cloning by realising that shirt wasn't a shirt he'd ever worn before. It's numbered hundreds of views across, there's hundreds of the video across YouTube and he just can't get it pulled down. So my question for you, Lizzie, is deep fake video, is there actually a positive use case for political deep fakes, or should we look at it like porn deep fakes and just say it should be illegal?
I don't think there is such a thing as porn deep fakes. I think that's sexual abuse material, because if it's fake material made without consent. Yep. Anyway, what I would say is I don't think there's any use case for that. I mean, deep fake videos, I think it is very hard to justify, right? Yep. And then the question is, what do you do to prohibit it? Because you can prohibit people generating that content, but the actual distribution network is what we need to target. And that's true for, particularly for deep fake sexual abuse imagery. There's a whole distribution mechanism. There's whole, I know I keep banging on about this, but companies that make money from allowing people to use that technology technology through subscription services, and then distribution networks that we could target to stop it. So there is an issue with both of those things, how this content is generated and who does it and for what purpose, but also how do we let that content get distributed? I think we need to target both if we're going to be effective.
And Hamish, the original sin of Section 230, where the carriers aren't actually liable for the content, means it's really hard to pull it down. And that was something else you touched on in your report.
Yeah, I mean, it just gave platforms the license to say we're platforms, not our fault, not our problem.
Yeah. Okay, number 3, a photo of our glorious Prime Minister really taking it up to the Israel president.
He looks a little fresh than
real or fake?
A little less than.
This was posted, Lizzie, in April 2026 as tensions between Australia and Israel escalated. I've got faith that our people are going to pick this one, but I don't. I'm giving them a lot of time.
I must say, Australian PM Anthony's a bit of a giveaway.
So come on, people, get your things in. So the reveal is, just because we are fighting the clock now, an AI-generated image posted on Facebook paired with a fabricated quote about the Lebanon strikes, posted at the peak of the live crisis and only being fact-checked by AAP a week later, after which it had been viewed thousands of times. So Hamish, I think this is more serious because it is in such a contested and divisive area. If we're creating alternate realities about something like Australia's relationship with Israel, it really raises the questions whether there is a case for provenance or watermarks on content. I don't know if you've thought about how if you saw something like that, how would you go about determining whether it was something you should be reporting on?
So, well, there's a lot in that, and
10 around.
10 people thought that was real. Okay, so digital watermarks are possible. You know, it is possible when we're talking about video content that some kind of blockchain is built into the original footage that stays with it, that gives it a degree of authentication or at least traceability. I think that could be something that is of value, so that if, for example, you're the ABC or you're Reuters or AP, you can assure your audience that you know the provenance of that material. I think there's some benefit to that. I know there's businesses like the one that Alan Finkel has started, which basically...
Proudly human. I'm the first accredited columnist. Thank you very much. So
you were part of the press release, I think, that you're available for interview.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
We did talk to Alan about it, where they authenticate that the content is human. I suppose I wonder whether we've kind of missed that boat to some degree. Maybe you both have a different view of that, because I think the volume of information is so great. You know, Maria Ressa, the Nobel laureate, talks about this.
We're about to see in a sec.
So, or maybe I'm stealing her thunder with this, but she talks about our global information streams being so heavily polluted, and those, whether they're journalists or people trying to depollute, sort of running around with these tiny little buckets trying to collect stuff as it's gushing, you know, a damn wall. So I don't know whether...
My argument for trust marks is it actually gives consumers an opportunity to make an informed choice. So if I'm saying I am not using AI in my writing, I want more people to be saying that, so that more people who choose that that's important to them can do so. So I don't think it's going to change the world, but I think it actually offers an alternative, like organic food.
You might be right. You might be right. And you know, maybe we're out of other good options. I don't know whether your readers are saying... But, you know, like, I don't know how much feedback people are giving you on that yet, or whether it's making much of a difference. But presumably there is a time... Like, I guess I think about it from the point of view of, you know, being an audio and visual content maker. What's our point of difference in the longer term if computers can do a lot of this stuff? It's live... The connection is human, the relationships you have are real with the people that you're talking to. Some of that stuff is hard for a computer to replicate. So I do think there are still defining features about what we do, and maybe I'm being naive about this, but I do think some of what we're doing, you know, your unique human perspective on the issues that you write about, Peter, a computer might be able to learn a lot about you, but as events in the world change, will it be able to replicate that easily? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
His
Lizzie?
mum loves reading him, that's why.
She did when she was with us. Let's go to the next snippet, Jeff. Let's show another snippet from the show. This is Maria Racer talking about the importance of media.
The goal of Russian disinformation is not to make you believe anything. It is to break open the fracture lines of society, to weaken from within.
Disinformation or hybrid wars are being waged across the world. If you're on social media, you may well be inadvertently consuming or even sharing this content. These campaigns have been identified as major global threats to peace and democracy. And while they're not physically devastating like conventional wars, the deliberate spread of false information targeting a country's population is considered a form of warfare.
Can democracy exist without shared facts?
Absolutely not. No. The tearing down of democracy began by tearing down facts. Democracy is taking that shared reality where we agree on what the facts are so that we can mobilize, move together. In the past, it used to be journalists. We were the gatekeepers.
I want to introduce you now to a good friend of the podcast, Emma Macdonald. Emma spent most of her career walking in the centre of this troubled beast as an executive at both ABC and Seven, a former lead of the Minderoo Frontier Technology Initiative, and also a senior advisor to Communications Minister Paul Fletcher, where she was key in negotiating the News Media Bargaining Code. And Emma, thanks for joining us tonight. I just thought it would be really interesting to give the crowd a bit of an insight into the challenges of holding big tech to account.
I'm assuming you mean from my time in government, because I guess I could also speak to it from my time at Minderoo and my time working in media
Or just
companies.
to your flat forehead, because, yeah.
Getting that legislation through Parliament was obviously a massive challenge. Our role was, I guess, secondary to the Treasurer's role, as he was the sort of lead in developing the News Media Bargaining Code off the back of the amazing work that Rod Sims and his team did at the ACCC and the Digital Platforms Inquiry. But because I worked with the Communications Minister and I was the advisor for the media company, well, in media, we had all the negotiations and discussions with all the stakeholders, which included obviously all the big media players, the small media players, hearing all their points of view as we tried to negotiate with Google and Facebook to get it through.
It's interesting though, because in the first iteration,
Yep.
the small guys were locked out, weren't they?
They weren't locked out, but there was they don't have as much power to knock on the doors of government as the big media companies do. So their voices were heard, but no, they weren't actually ever locked out. It was always going to be harder for them to get deals on their own than it would be for ABC, 7, 9, 10, News Corp, etc. Which is why there was that sort of the concept of collective bargaining introduced for the benefit of the small publishers.
It is fair to say, though, that the last 10, 15 years of social media being dominant as a place in which people spend a lot of time, receive a lot of advertising, it has been devastating to the media industry that we would have traditionally understood, right? As in that money that would sustain mainstream journalism or legacy media, whatever you want to call it, came from advertising is now largely going to social media. So that's a catastrophic change that the media industry's had to adapt to. But that's true for large publishers and media outfits, as well as small journalism outfits that might have done the work of community news, specific niche news products. So can you talk a little bit then about the work that you've done to advocate for those organisations to be part of that redistribution of funds away from those social media platforms towards news media organisations?
Sure. So when I was at Minderoo Foundation, we decided that it was important that we give support to small publishers and give them an opportunity to have a seat at the table and negotiate with Google and Facebook to secure funding for their media businesses, which was something that was lacking the big media players got their deals done pretty quickly. Most of those deals have now expired, but nobody was advocating for small publishers. There was Country Press Association, which did do an amazing job for their members, but besides that, there was no other group. So this motley crew of small publishers came to me, and they call themselves the Public Interest Publishers Alliance, and said, we want to negotiate with Google and Facebook, and there's no one to talk to, we can't find a phone number, we don't have an email address, we have no access to any of these people, can you help? So I did manage to secure a deal for all 24 of those publishers. To your point, Lizzie, though, several of them have fallen over since, but most of them are still operating, and to me that was really important because the big guys, as I said, could come and knock on the door of the minister, the Prime Minister, whoever they like, but the smaller publishers just didn't have that vehicle, and so to collectively bargain and have the power of Minderoo behind them meant that, that Google did. They were actually really good to work with, I have to say. Facebook never spoke to us. I couldn't get a meeting with them, but Google were very honest brokers, and we ended up successfully negotiating a sum of money that I can't talk about.
So now we've got the news media bargaining incentive, and this isn't a law lecture, so we're not going to go into that, but there is the same threat that the small guys are going to be cut out.
Yes, there's a very big threat. The news bargaining incentive, as it's currently drafted, suggests that the three platforms, TikTok, Google and Facebook, could acquit their obligations under that news bargaining incentive by doing 4 deals. And that is a massive problem, that you could end up with 4 companies getting all the money and from the 3 of them. So you could end up with 12 or whatever, but you could literally end up with 4 times 3. So that's something that needs to be addressed in the legislation. And I know the small publishing like Lena and Public Interest Publishers are both sort of talking to government about that.
Hamish, it also bleeds into the stalemate at the moment between publishers and AI companies around copyright and AI. I don't know your perspective on, it seems like the same battle but in a different field of conflict.
Yes, and actually a lot of the big media bosses came together last week at the Ollie lecture. Hugh Marks from the ABC, Matt Stanton from Nine, Michael Miller from News.
There's nothing like self-interest to unify the big media bosses.
Well, look, it was pretty interesting, I thought, because they were all discussing their approach, and the Ollie lecture this year was delivered by the editor-in-chief of Reuters, who actually I thought, the global editor-in-chief actually of Reuters, who offered, I thought, a pretty interesting perspective on how Australian news outlets, media outlets might approach negotiating with AI. The Reuters model is a subscriber service in a sense. They've been licensing their content to other partners for decades, the bulk of their 170-year history, whatever it is. And so her argument was, we've had to consider what our principles are for our licensing for a very long time, and that's how you should go about this. There's quite interesting and unusual requests being made of the news outlets in Australia by the big AI firms. Like, it was during that conversation that Hugh Marks revealed publicly that Anthropic wants the ABC audio archive, so the back catalogue of local radio, because it's just chat, basically. It's people talking to one another. It's Australian dialect.
It's human content the machines want to feed off because they want to suck
quality
our
content
blood.
as well, though, compared to the rest of the internet. It's very high quality training content.
Completely. And so, AI tools or LLMs have not had access to some of this high quality audio content. And so Alessandra Galloni from Reuters, her argument was, think about this as a licensing operation, as if you were going to have your content delivered by other media outlets in the way that we do. Think about whether you would let them change your content, the degree to which they can tamper with it, the purpose of the journalism you're conducting. And I actually thought that was a really interesting framing for me in terms of considering or trying to understand what might be at stake.
Before you go, Emma, I've got a very important job for you. So we're about at the halfway mark and it's time for a word from our sponsor. And this is very exciting because we've never had a sponsor before, Lizzie. But because Hamish works for the ABC...
I'm sorry, I had to say I can't be part of this.
And I said to Hamish, would you mind being a mosquito? And he said no. But Emma, can you buzz? Can you just be a mosquito buzzing and we're going to do a live read of an ad for the Democracy Counts
the whole time.
campaign. So when you're ready, Emma, I just need you to be very... You're a mosquito.
Oh, that's perfect.
These lies!
The constant buzz of disinformation can get under your skin.
How can you concentrate when you're bombarded with slop?
It doesn't need to be like this. Democracy Counts as a campaign for simple reforms to ensure your voice is heard and the public interest wins.
Oh, louder, stop. That'll get rid of the little buggers.
Go to democracycounts.org.au to count yourself in.
Thanks, Emma.
I'm really sorry I couldn't be part of that.
I know, you would have been really good at that, Hamish.
You would have been such a good mosquito too, I'm sure. But rules are rules. So notwithstanding your comments earlier, one of the real joys for me about your series was you discovered Audrey Tang, who is a big inspiration for us at Burning Platforms. So what are the positives you took away from her work?
Look, I think the amazing thing about Taiwan is this very activated citizenry, right? People are very engaged with the notion of mis and disinformation, and not just the role of government in combating that, but as individuals. I think for me that was the big distinction. And I saw a bit of this in places like Finland and Poland as well in recent years. And I think, in a sense, it's to do with proximity, right? When the danger is clear, present, it's in your vicinity, you're more alive to the flow-on effects. You know, we're aware that mis and disinformation occurs in Australia, that it's in our realm, that there might be foreign state actors that are behind it. But I think it's a little harder for us as a broader society to conceive of how that might then flow into something tangible. In Poland, in Finland, in Taiwan, that's more obvious. And so I think the kind of activated population is the thing that was pretty amazing to my mind.
So we were hoping to get Audrey to stream in, but as you know, they are a hard woman to reach. We've got a snippet from the show. While we're showing that, I'm going to bring up to the stage Jess Scully, who's trying to put some of these principles into place in Australia. So welcome, Jess, from RadicalXChange, and let's go to the next snippet.
To random numbers around Taiwan, asking what should we do about the deepfake advertisement online? And we chose 450 people, and those 450 people in rooms of 10, facilitated by AI system. It can summarize in real time what each room of people have agreed on. One room may say, Facebook earns advertisement money from those scammers, so Facebook should be liable. And maybe another room say, TikTok, ByteDance, we should slow down connection to their servers until all their business goes to Google. All these ideas become a draft law in May, and it passed last July. You simply do not see those sponsored fake advertisements anymore because the people, through citizen assembly, set the rules that govern the AI's deepfake harm. And so I think we can use AI to address the harms of AI to democracy by using AI to foster democracy. Thank you.
So, Jess, you came across Audrey's work while you were the Deputy Lord Mayor of Sydney. How did her work speak to you?
I mean, sorry, little...
Buying the drinks.
There we go. It was one of those kind of glimmers of hope that, you know, when I was writing a book at the time, and really interested in citizens' assemblies and different ways that we could get more voice, more democracy all the time, everywhere in the mix. And I always thought the easiest problem to solve would be the bit about having a public conversation. And I kept running into the fact that that is one of the hardest problems to solve, harder now than it was, then 10 years ago or so. And then Taiwan was really this glimmer of hope, a place where they had a different kind of revolution, one which didn't just protest but demonstrated, in Audrey's words. They demonstrated another way of people having their voices heard, putting forward propositions, negotiating across difference, and then finding ways to use technology, not to take democracy apart for parts, which is what we're seeing a lot at the moment, but actually to use it, using technology in service of democracy and finding the commonality between us. And that realm is called civic tech.
So tell us about the RadicalXChange project, because it's really about getting the technology there so people that want to do things differently can do so.
Yeah, absolutely. So Audrey's kind of the patron saint of civic tech, and Taiwan is the one of the key ecosystems that demonstrates how effective it can be. RadicalXChange started about 8 years ago. It was built based on a book called Radical Markets by Glenn Weil and Eric Posner, and it's about institutional innovation, not just in how we participate in democracy, but how we share and steward public goods as well. And so it's a US-based foundation, but it's got this global network and community, and Audrey's one of our board members among a whole bunch of other really remarkable people. What we're trying to do is to demonstrate participatory governance for our democracy, to enrich our democracy, but also for the age of AI, because we're in this era where more of our assets in common, or the common wealth we produce through our activities online, are being extracted and enclosed, another enclosure of the commons essentially. And we need to bring a level of participatory governance to the data commons as much as we need to enrich and renew our democratic processes, and technology and even AI can help us to do that.
I was wondering, Jess, if you could talk a little bit about COFAX. So I like your idea, Hamish, that we actually need to have people taking responsibility for themselves. I mean, that sounds like a negative thing, but what I mean is you want citizens involved in the democracy. It's not going to come from the top down alone. You can have regulation, you can have policy made by elected lawmakers, you can have high quality elections, but you also need people who are prepared to defend, protect, invest in their democracy through everyday activities. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit, Jess, about COFAX, because that sort of strikes me as a good example of one of those initiatives, a bottom-up initiative that involves participation in the online spaces, in democracy, to foster an information ecosystem that's more conducive to democratic principles.
Absolutely. So there's two things that I think are really pertinent from COFAX. So COFAX is a public an open source citizen project from Taiwan that was started by two young people in about 2016 at the time of Taiwan's marriage equality debate. So when they had a marriage equality debate, they found that their information ecosystem was really polluted with a lot of misinformation. Something that is now called information disorders, I think is my favourite framing, that we're in an era of information disorder. And so Billion and her partner started this platform which is open source, so there's a high level of radical transparency in the process. It's not a walled garden where you can't see in, like with a lot of the platforms. And the other thing is that it's social, and a critical element of the information disorders we're experiencing is that when we receive misinformation from Uncle Jerry or whoever else, it's shrouded in social trust. It comes from people that we already trust, and so it can have more weight because of that. What COFAX does is it actually uses those social networks and channels to correct misinformation. So it uses a platform called Line, which is like the WhatsApp of Taiwan. When people get something dodgy in the group chat, they forward it to COFAX, and a whole bunch of citizens checkers check the authenticity of that comment, and then they get something they can post back in the group chat. And they're also keeping track of the kinds of trends and misinformation that comes up, which was hugely helpful for them during COVID-19, and one of the contributing factors, I think, to Taiwan's extraordinary success during COVID.
So Jess, part of your model, or Audrey's model, is shifting from the binary to the complex. And I know you're trying to do this over here with the ultimate binary, YIMBY and NIMBY. How's that going?
So RadicalXChange is, we're everywhere, but we're now more in Australia more than ever before, because I'm based here and I'm the executive director. And we thought, what a way to start in Australia is just to start with housing and the housing debate. And we're working with a not-for-profit here who wanted to ask, how can we have a better conversation about density in Australia? And rather than flee from conflict, we actually dive straight into it, and we talk about issue-native publics, the people who are closest to the issue, have the most to say and are most informed. And in this case, it's people who are unconditional supporters of density and people who are unconditional opponents of density, or have their good reasons on both sides. But we did a deliberative process in June with these two cohorts over a couple of weeks. And we found that despite the headline disagreement, there is a great deal of bridging across these groups. There's a lot that they can agree on. And if we want to reset the public conversation about adding density in our cities, we should start with those bridging factors, that common or uncommon ground, as Audrey calls it. And we then took those bridging statements to a demographically representative public over a couple of weeks as well.
And some of the points of agreement, if Tamara clicks it again, were interesting, right?
So super.
What were the unifying concepts there, Jess?
Well, one of the key unifying things is that everyone is cynical of the idea of affordability being undefined in the Australian debate. There is no definition of affordability in Australian housing. A huge, huge problem that could be solved right there. They're also really cynical about the idea of permanent affordability, how that's actually delivered, and whether that can in fact be delivered. At the moment, most governments are requiring 15 years of affordability, and no one really believes that a private developer can deliver one affordable apartment that's worth $2 million in a block. Nobody's buying that. And so that's something that people want they want more clarity around that definition. They think there needs to be interventions in public housing. That's something that's unifying across the board. And they also believe deeply in open space and green space. But affordability is one of the most contentious issues here. This is a quadratic vote that we conducted as part of the process. A quadratic vote is something that our founder invented and that we use a lot. It encourages and enables trade-offs and prioritisation in groups.
So 100 points.
100 points. You can vote for and against. And here you can see in the middle there, there's a vertical line which is 0 votes, and below the line you can see there's a whole lot of negative votes on affordable housing, as well as some of the most intense positive votes. And so essentially, this is where people don't believe in the mechanisms that are being offered to them to achieve affordability. So this is a critical issue of contention that would need to be addressed to get true consensus on affordability in Australia.
Hamish, one of the challenges on an approach that breaks the binary is obviously for the media, because you guys breed off the conflict. How do you tell stories about people agreeing? It doesn't really work, does it?
I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but I think, I suppose the way I look at it, having heard Jess's explanation there and looking at what Audrey does, everyone is engaged, like there's hyper engagement at the moment on a whole host of issues, whether it's housing affordability, whether it's the Middle East, like any number of issues. And the divisions, the binaries are what we hear about, but from a kind of engaged citizenry point of view, if we're taking Taiwan as the example, it can be a good thing that the population's highly engaged, right? We were talking earlier today on radio about the Twitter revolutions of the Arab Spring. Like I distinctly remember that period, like being in Egypt, being in Libya.
The good internet.
Yeah, and there was all of this hope and optimism about how Twitter was going to bring democracy to the dictatorships of the world. It was an incredibly hopeful time. Like, I was there on Tahrir Square tweeting and monitoring the tweets coming in from these revolution leaders that had just kind of sprung up out of Twitter feeds. It was an extraordinary time. And so I think we can all grasp the notion that this very high engagement in the conversation does have the capacity to be positive. I'm not sure I totally agree that we feed off the disagreement or feed off the binaries, because so often, like, I actually reckon the benefit of having a sort of town square media, a public broadcaster, is that you're not allowing the binaries just to sit on their own. Like, there are media outlets you can go to or social media feeds you can go to where you can find people that by and large agree with your view, and they will just keep feeding you that, if it's on housing or the Middle East or any of the other issues. I think the role of a public broadcaster particularly is to make sure that those arguments and contests don't exist in isolation but are brought together. And we live in a time where that's a little challenging for people. It's harder for people to hear those different views. But if you are going to have social cohesion, if you are going to get to outcomes, I think you actually do have to bring those arguments together into the same space. So I know it's a subtle difference to what you're observing, and I'm not disagreeing that that exists, but it's how I see my role particularly is to bring them all, those conversations into the one space so that we can all hear each other.
The other opportunity presented by this, though, is to say that people don't often think of public transport as a housing issue, right? That when we talk about housing in many highly viewed or highly subscribed settings, it's often talked about as what kind of money can we give to new homeowners, what kind of problems do we have with people's mortgage payments being too high, rather than how do we build out the infrastructure that might transform housing. So I think the other opportunity of these kinds of engagement techniques is to say what issues might not seem like issues that are centrally relevant, but in fact for many people are and aren't being brought into the conversation in the same way. So that's the other kind of instructive possibility, I think, that comes from this kind of work for media and journalism.
Wind it up for us, Jess, because I've lost total control of this.
Sorry.
It's exciting. Can I just say it is exciting? Yeah, like, where the technology offers opportunity, right, to solve it. And I think that's what you're tapping into with the Audrey Tang stuff. It is possible that we can use some of these tools to solve some of the problems that feel completely unsolvable at the moment.
Yeah, well, two quick things. Part of this process is about moral legibility. It's about having processes that allow people to see each other across difference and to realise that despite the headline difference, we have shared values and there are things we can cooperate on. And we live in a polluted information ecosystem that benefits, it's incentivised to create polarisation and tribalism. And so we need to run counter to those incentives, and that's what civic tech can do. And secondly, we're never going to run out of issues that we can do this on. Our next program is on data centres in Australia, and there's an amazing program where, what are the community conditions for something like that? If we could dive down into the detail here and understand it's not just the headline disagreement, argy-bargy, nimby-yimby, there are genuine shared concerns that people have.
This will be a discussion for another Burning Platforms. Jess, thanks so much for your work and thanks for being part of tonight. So we know things are changing fast. We've got new tools. We also have a new generation who have grown up in this fractured information environment. I want to welcome up to the stage Professor Leo Robba from Western Sydney University, who's leading a new public interest platform designed to teach the next generation of journalists and storytellers. You're going to talk to us about the Learning Partnership with McKinnon, looking at polarisation and Gen Z civic engagement. And I'm going to hand it over to you and go and be the roving mic with some of your students.
Okay.
Steal your one.
Thanks, Pete. Really lovely to be here. We're going to talk... I want to first introduce a project that we're working on at Western Sydney University, which is we're calling Western Source, and it'll be launched later this year. And it addresses the issue as educators and a cornerstone institution in this region. How do we address the education of the media leaders of the future? And so Western Source will be a digital platform where we will employ real journalists to work with students in work-integrated learning. And they will cover news stories. It won't be an arm of the university's marketing department. It will be a news platform, and where students can create content through animation, data visualization, news stories, and so that's the aim for this project, and it's to address the news desert in Western Sydney, and it's going to be for students by students.
Should we show a bit of a video you guys have put together?
Yes.
I think that news and media around election time is trustworthy?
Not really. I feel like everything's like really biased.
A recent McKinnon poll has found some alarming things about social cohesion and polarisation in Australia, particularly among young people. More than 3/4 of Australians say the country is divided. 55% say it's gotten worse in the last 5 years. When people talk about division, they usually mean polarisation, the hardening of opposing views into something that makes conversation impossible.
Do you think that polarisation in society is a threat to our democracy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the ability to coexist with one another, that's a huge part of multiculturalism.
If polarisation is the symptom, many people point to misinformation and social media as the cause. A third of Gen Z believe people they disagree with politically are just misinformed, the highest of any age group. Less than half of Australians feel comfortable discussing controversial issues online.
I'm Arab, so with that context in mind, a lot of fake news about Arab and Muslim people is extremely damaging, and people feel so unsafe. It completely equips people with the most harmful tools possible.
Do you ever feel like you're being misled by the media and news? Yes. Do you think fake news affects our democracy?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Hold just a little bit.
Okay, now we're going to talk to a few students who are here tonight. We've got about 6 of them here, but the first question is for Whitney. Whitney, can you identify yourself for Pete? So Whitney, can you talk about media literacy and trust and how young people are being disenfranchised?
Yes, I sure can. Hi guys, I'm Whitney.
Stand up. Look at the room.
Okay. So, young people are being... Hi. Wow, that's a room full of people. Awesome. So I think young people are being disenfranchised by, well, my personal opinion is by big tech, honestly. So we are the generation that grew up with social media. It's a place where we form a lot of connections. It's where our community is. And it's being infiltrated heavily by bots, really. And I think the onus has come back onto us to be media literate, and we have to hold each other accountable. And it's very frustrating, like, how these big tech companies are just getting away with having no accountability and completely disregarding our safety online. Is that
great?
Okay.
Okay, next is TJ. Pete, TJ is down the front here.
TJ.
So can you talk a little bit about what you learned from the experience and what surprised you about people's responses?
Oh, geez, wow. Hello. I'm TJ, and I'm South Asian, just FYI. And this was a really big learning experience, I think, for all of us. We all have our own experiences, our own, upbringing and things like that, different things that have influenced our way of thinking and how we see the world. And so it was really surprising for me, especially, to see how different opinions were when we did our interviews, namely in Harris Park. Unfortunately, we didn't get to show that clip, but if anyone knows, Harris Park is called Little India. So hearing the opinions of the people there was really, really important to me, and hearing that so many people there had felt such positive experiences there and have seen and heard positive experiences was really moving, considering how unfortunate it is that a lot of South Asians do have a bit of a bad rep in social media and the public, but it was a very happy thing for me. It's kind of telling, how important it is to have really safe spaces for these marginalised communities.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question is for Jade. So Jade, did the process change your opinion about the importance of trust in the media?
Hello, my name is Jade, and I 100% think that fake news changes everyone's opinion, because fake news is basically everywhere, especially online and social media platforms. So I think it's 100% important to get verified sources and valuable sources as well, because those can change everyone's views and perspectives, especially on a political basis as well, which I have learned over the past interviews. As mentioned in the video, some people think that the society has worsened, which is proven. So I think it's really important to get trustworthy sources. Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jade. Okay, we want to move to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so I wanted to share with you a few of the social design projects our students did as part of a learning partnership with Mackinnon. So using Mackinnon's research as the foundation, we asked students to design campaigns and possible interventions that positively address social cohesion and the democratic resilience. So the opportunity for students was to ask Gen Zs as democratic stewards 3 possible directions. So disagreeing without dehumanising, rethinking the feed, media literacy in the algorithmic age, democracy in action from outrage to impact. And if we go to the next slide, thanks. One of the projects that we did, one of the students did, was Brain Check, enabling media literacy and civic engagements by students, for students. The campaign was created with the goal of teaching and encouraging media literacy in Gen Z in the area of AI and social media algorithms. This will be achieved through a series of in-person run workshops held at university libraries across Australia, which will focus on identifying AI-generated content and misinformation, something that Hamish is also very familiar with. The goal is to enable media literacy and civic engagement by students for students. Next slide, thanks.
Yep. They're ahead of you, Leo.
Oh, okay. Okay, the virus. So this is one of my favourites. Fights misinformation by exposing how it spreads. The concept is to create a poster and headlines that look authentic but are entirely fabricated, designed with the same attention-grabbing tactics real misinformation uses. Installed in public spaces. Each poster contains a QR code, so scanning leads not to the truth, but to a breakdown of exactly how it was created as an educational tool for students. Yep. Okay. So that's...
Last one? Or is that it?
No, that is amazing. Big hand for the students, and thanks, Leo. So, I've probably got 2 mics on. I'll hand this one to you.
My favourite Pope, Leo, in his encyclical, speaks about the notion, and I can't remember the name of it now, Lizzie, you'll help me with this, but the idea that solutions don't come from the top down, they come from the bottom up. And I think it's amazing what Leo and his students are doing to build their own futures and not wait for the wise old people to tell them how to live their lives. So, you know, terrific, and thank you so much for your work. All right, we're coming to the end. If we're a little bit over time. If people have got another 10 minutes, we've got one more really important topic, which is actually what the hell do we do about all this, apart from listen to the young people, which is a really good first step. So, Hamish, in the show, we loved it because your hero at the end was Lizzie and Digital Rights Watch. And it was interesting that you landed on civic advocacy, the sort of work that Lizzie does, as part of the way forward. Why did you make that choice?
Well, I think I sort of alluded to this before. I think in this, as this technology evolves, we've seen that you can't wait for government to make all of the decisions that protect you. It's going to happen. It's going to take time for governments to catch up. And actually, I think we all can see and feel the change that's happening. And so just as important as asking leaders to make decisions is asking what each of us as individuals can do. We're all picking up the device. We're all trying Claude or ChatGPT or looking at Instagram. We're all part of this. And I think just assuming that governments will get it and will make the decisions that protect us is probably a little bit naive. And so I'm not saying we shouldn't expect that of leaders or governments.
We should demand it.
But, you know, again, Lizzie and Tom and I were talking about this earlier today. We can see how difficult it is to regulate tech. The social media under 16 ban, you know, if you look at the pushback against that, the implementation, the willingness of the platforms to abide by that legislation, you know, it is a difficult battle, and sovereign states are up against very powerful big tech in trying to retain, you know, legislative domain over their own countries. And so I think we all have to be alive to the fact that we do participate in this and we do play a part. And if you want a better dialogue, if you want a healthy democracy, everyone has to take part in that.
That's what the great J.K. Galbraith calls countervailing power. Let's go to the final snippet of the night, which is about the humble motivation.
Here in Australia, we've come to be very much a nation on wheels.
Cars, when they started being sold en masse to the public, there was an assumption that drivers are responsible for all mishaps, accidents that occur in vehicles. We just make the product, there's nothing we can do. It's their responsibility if something goes wrong. People were harmed en masse by vehicles that were not designed well, even though the companies manufacturing them knew that to be true. We don't take that approach to cars anymore. We now have safety features, we have seat belts, we have airbags. That was not introduced because the car industry thought it was a good idea. They had to be cajoled into doing it. We need to take an approach to regulation that enshrines what we think is fair and reasonable as a society, and then require companies to comply.
Hear, hear. So, how's that going, Lizzie?
Oh, cars are safer than they've ever been. But yeah, I think there are examples of novel technology at the relevant point in time that was received by the public with some scepticism, that took a lot of time and effort by people working together to get an outcome that is more an alignment between the regulatory ecosystem and what people expect, right? Cars are one such example. Like many people campaigned for cars to improve their safety. This was not a single...
Many people died.
Many people died, yeah. So this is not... And, you know, someone like Ralph Nader, who was one of the key campaigners around car safety, was tracked and spied on by car companies who were trying to undermine his campaign for changes in design. This was not a fair fight. There was a lot of contested campaigning that took place. And this is true for lots of different technologies. Cars is one such example. But now the industry looks totally different. We don't blame users for all of the problems that go wrong in cars. We have expectations of minimum standards. We take steps to improve them and impose those regulations on companies, even when they might moan that it's expensive or difficult to do, right? And so what I would say is that we need similar kinds of movements that, you know, the term regulation sounds a bit dull, but what I think we actually mean is policies, ideas, obligations that we impose on these really large companies, some of the largest companies humanity's ever seen. I think Hamish is right to point out that governments who are working to resist their interests are up against it, right? Because these are very powerful organisations that invest in our civic life, as well as doing the work of having very monopolistic kind of capabilities in particular industries they're involved in, the backing often of the United States, right? These are very powerful companies. Asking our politicians to stand up to them, I think that's only going to work if they know they've got a mandate from the public, and they know also they'll be held to account if they don't. Like, one of the jobs that we give ourselves at Digital Rights Watch is reminding elected representatives who it is that they work for, and trying to cast some transparency on the decisions they make and say, we can have an alternative, here's a bunch of ideas for what we could do differently, and also the public supports it. But so before I let you talk again, I would just say Australians are some of the most sceptical about AI in the world. There's global surveys done on attitudes to AI, and we rate last or dead last together with Finland and New Zealand, great friends there, I think, who are least optimistic about this technology. And that's in spite of the fact that a lot of these tech leaders talk about this as godlike, as transforming our society for better. Sometimes politicians talk about the productivity potentials in quite glowing terms, and it's met by the public with a form of scepticism, which I think is really interesting. I think that's a superpower of Australian society, because what it does is it lays the foundation for more critical, discerning policies adoption of technology. And in the long run, I think we'll be better off. I think we're a governed society who understands the importance of rules, and I think we don't like people who come here and try to sell us stuff and say, just ignore the rules for a bit because in the long run it'll be worth it. I don't think we accept that bargain. And so that's a great position to be in as this technology comes out.
Where do you think Australia is after the PM's speech the other week? I know you've described it as the Barbie movie speech. Do you want to...
When I was thinking about going to see the Barbie movie, I was a bit sceptical, and I kept going, what's the Barbie movie about? And someone would say, oh, it's about liberal girl boss feminism. And someone else said, no, it's about socialist feminism. And someone else said, it's about slavery. And I was like, what is this film about? And then it turns out it's about all of those things, like Ken was in slavery. Anyway, what I was going to say was, I feel like the PM's speech the other week was a bit like that, because I talked to all these different people and they had a slightly different takeout from that speech. Wow, he's laying down the law. Oh, we're open for business. Oh, we want more data centres. Actually, he thinks that we have to protect copyright holders. And I think all of those things were in that speech, right? And so maybe that's the art of a good political speech.
That's a Trump speech.
Yeah.
There's something in it for everyone.
Yeah, something in it for everyone. Well,
the defence of it is that we start with what we agree on, to Jess's point, and then we interrogate the points of friction.
I think I actually am very excited by this shift, because people may know, but there was originally a few years ago an idea that we'd have a regulation that was abandoned for a plan. So no hard regulation of artificial intelligence. But this speech, I think, signals an acceptance that the government knows people are concerned and they have to act on it. They've since highlighted 4 consumer priorities for AI. So that includes things like automated decision-making in government. Oh my God, this is a test. Automated decision-making in government, privacy, digital duty of care.
Work.
And AI in the workplace, so workplace protections. And I think that speaks to a lot of people, as it should. Those are the key places where they're watching AI roll out. They're worried that it's not being done in a discerning, considered fashion. They're worried people might be harmed, and they want the government to do something about it. So what that suggests to me is the government's listening. Now, it takes some work to get them to listen, but that's work we can all do, and I'm really excited. It's much better having a government that's interested in listening than one that isn't, and we can create those conditions for that to occur, and this is the moment to start talking about what we want the future to look like.
Indeed. Hamish, you've probably now realised this was all a cunning entrapment exercise to expose you to all the great ideas tonight. What's your advice to people in the room on how we can work together with journalists like you to build the public literacy in these really important conversations?
I think the good news is there's quite a lot. I mean, at the moment, you know, the ABC is rolling out this project called Your Say. It's literally to ask you to guide the ABC on what you would like it to cover. There are participatory options everywhere you look across the national broadcaster. Obviously, I'm going to advocate for what we do, but I think most media organisations are making some effort to ensure that the coverage is more reflective of where the audience, where the broader public is at. You know, it's really interesting to me, working on talkback radio, how much the data centre story has blown up over the last 18 months. We barely talked about it January 2 years ago. Now, not a week goes by where there's not a pretty interesting discussion about data centres just in this city as well as this country. I think, you know, the exciting bit is you live in a time where there are any number of ways to get involved in the public conversation. I'm guessing if you're here tonight, you have a view one way or another, or at least a curiosity. So I would say, if that's the case, get involved. Don't be sitting back. Don't be doing it all on a keyboard. Use your powers of persuasion and argument. Turn up on the radio shows. Get involved with the television programs. Pitch stories to the television networks. Just don't wait for it to happen. Step up.
Here. And Lizzie, what's your one ask for people here tonight or listening? And we might go to the slide where we entrap everyone to click a few more links.
Yeah, well, obviously I think you should sign up to Digital Rights Watch so you can find out what we're up to and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I think Hamish was nice enough to put us in the documentary, but there are lots and lots of organisations doing this kind of work, including on data centre policy, including Jess's organisation, which involves a lot of the community and finds ways to talk about these issues in new and interesting manners. So there's lots of different organisations working in this space that I think have a really important contribution to make to creating that democratic narrative, that democratic mandate for elected reps to do their job in what is a very contested and challenging space. And that kind of engine, that kind of human brain that is operating in a diffuse and democratic way, I think is the best kind of thing we can build if we want a future that looks bright for everyone.
Indeed. Look, for mine, these discussions are so engaging because we're actually charting new territory. The check changes the world and it challenges us to also reconsider our worldviews. We're all active authors in this story, and I urge everyone to get engaged, sign up to Democracy Counts, talk to friends and families who are the only people that are ever going to trust you. And let's make the most of this moment because the world is changing around us now. And if we sit back and let it happen, we've only got ourselves to blame. So look, thanks Tom and the team at McKinnon for supporting tonight's event. Thanks for all of you who've joined us here at 5. There is a debrief over drinks immediately after this. Give it up for our guests, Leo Robba and his students, Jess Scully, Emma McDonald, Lizzie O'Shea and Hamish Macdonald. My name's Peter Lewis. If you haven't joined Digital Rights, do it now. And while you're up it, sign up to Burning Platforms on Substack. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.